Renowned race car driver Clerfayt traveled to the Alpine Sanatorium Montaigne for tuberculosis patients to visit his friend and former partner Holman. On the road he encountered a horse-drawn sled. The horses spooked and reared, turning the sled sideways on the road, but Clerfayt managed to grab their reins in time. A tall man with a cold, arrogant face was driving the sled. Behind him sat a beautiful, young woman with very light, transparent eyes. Holman had spent almost a year at the sanatorium and missed his profession greatly. To support his friend, Clerfayt stayed for a few days, staying in the local hotel. From Holman, he learned that the man he met on the road was Boris Volkov, a wealthy descendant of Russian white émigrés, treating tuberculosis in the Alps. The woman, 24-year-old Lillian Dunkirk, was his lover and was undergoing treatment alongside Holman. That day, Lillian's best friend died of tuberculosis, and she began to contemplate her future. She was seriously ill and could spend her whole life in this comfortable prison. That same evening, Lillian slipped away from the sanatorium and spent the evening with Clerfayt at the Palace Bar. They spent several evenings together. Clerfayt was also a man without a future, existing from one race to another. That's what attracted Lillian to him. She had no future either. One day Lillian announced that she was leaving the sanatorium and asked Clerfayt to take her to Paris where her uncle lived. Arriving in Paris and unpacking, Lillian went to her uncle Gaston to collect the money left for her by her parents. After some time, Clerfayt went to Rome for 2 weeks to sign a contract for the upcoming races. Occasionally, he thought of Lillian with an unknown tenderness, but upon meeting Lydia Morelli, he realized that Lillian was not the right match for him. Meeting Lillian again, Clerfayt was amazed at how she had changed. She transformed into a charming woman. He was mesmerized. Now he needed only her. Lillian and Clerfayt continued to see each other. He showed her the best restaurants and cabarets in Paris. Soon they headed to Sicily, where the Targa Florio races were taking place. Lillian watched the races from the stands. Clerfayt injured his shoulder, but he had to finish the race. Now Lillian almost hated him for loving him too much. By the end of the race she knew she would leave him. Clerfayt suggested Lillian live in Palermo while his shoulder healed, and then they could slowly travel through Europe. Lillian refused. She wanted to be alone and promised Clerfayt she would wait for him in Paris. Arriving in Rome, Lillian unexpectedly decided to go to Venice. The pervasive dampness of this city exacerbated her illness. Lillian started pleading. She spent a week in bed, not informing Clerfayt of anything. Lillian didn't want him to see her sick. Unable to find Lillian in Paris or the Alpine Sanatorium, Clerfayt began to think she had left him. He tried to forget Lillian and find solace in his previous diversions. Abandoning these attempts, Clerfayt fell into apathy. He didn't even suspect that Lillian had returned to Paris and settled in the Bisson Hotel again, as if returning to an old harbor after a severe storm. Now Lillian knew there was no salvation for her. Clerfayt saw her in the hotel window while passing by. Lillian hid her tuberculosis worsening, saying she just wanted to live in Venice, and had caught a slight cold. Clerfayt didn't believe her. Fearing she would disappear again, he proposed to her. Lillian didn't refuse him but felt that Clerfayt had changed. He now had a future, while she had none at all. She asked him to wait until the next year, knowing that by that time she would no longer be there. Soon, Clerfayt left for a 1,000-mile race in Brescia. This time, Lillian didn't go with him. She followed the races on the radio. These races in Brescia ended and began. To Lillian, it seemed as senseless as running in circles, breaking out of Brescia at unimaginable speed only to return there a few hours later. Lillian thought that life was like a race from Brescia to Brescia. Only in the sanatorium, everything was different. There, people fought for every breath. Remembering the sanatorium, she decided to call Holman. He informed her that Boris Volkov no longer came. Holman saw him a few weeks ago. He was walking with his dog. Apparently, everything was fine with Boris. The Monaco Grand Prix, the biggest competition of the year, was approaching. Clerfayt disappeared again for training. Now love seemed to Lillian an infinitely long corridor. She had only a few months left to live, and she didn't want to walk down that corridor. The racing track ran straight through the city streets and was full of sharp turns. Lillian sat in the stands, watching cars conquer lap after lap. On the 40th lap, she decided to leave. Clerfayt was in second place. Suddenly, the leading car blocked the road and spilled oil on the highway. Unable to avoid the puddle, Clerfayt hesitated, and at that moment, the car behind him crushed his vehicle. Clerfayt's chest was crushed. Lillian heard about it as she was descending from the stands. She rushed to the hospital. Clerfayt did not survive until the operation. He died being unconscious. Lillian was in a stupor. It seemed unfair to her that Clerfayt died before her. Lillian had a strange feeling, as if she had taken someone else's place. Gathering courage, she called Boris. An unfamiliar female voice informed her that he wasn't there. Lillian decided he had also died. Boris found the girl at the train station. He heard about Clerfayt's death and immediately went after Lillian. Now she understood that there are no places or things worth throwing life away for. Boris had long known this. Lillian was admitted to Montaigne. On the mountain road leading to the sanatorium, they met Holman. He had recovered, and the team took him in place of Clerfayt. Lillian died from bleeding 6 weeks after arriving at the sanatorium, leaving Boris all alone, now forever. And, as always, if you enjoyed this summary, don't forget to like and subscribe for more literary explorations. Thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next video. Happy reading!